Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of The Graceview Patient by Caitlin Starling. This is a horror thriller coming out October 14th, 2025 from St. Martin's Press. I received this arc from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. For a book where the main character is essentially lying in bed for most of it, The Graceview Patient is remarkably interesting. What's it about? Margaret lives with a rare autoimmune condition that destroyed her life, leaving her isolated. It has no cure, but she's making do as best she can, until she's offered a fully paid-for spot in an experimental medical trial at Graceview Memorial. The conditions are simple, if grueling. She will live at the hospital as a full-time patient, subjecting herself to the near-total destruction of her immune system and its subsequent regeneration. The trial will essentially kill most of, but not all of her. But as the treatment progresses and her body begins to fail, she stumbles upon something sinister living and spreading within the hospital. Unsure what's real and what is just medication-induced illusion, Margaret struggles to find a way out as her body and mind succumb further to the darkness lurking throughout Graceview's halls. A tagline of the book that I didn't include mentioned Misery by Stephen King as a comparison title, which I think is a good comparison in terms of what is literally going on. Someone stuck in a bed, but that's where the only real similarity lies. Misery features an intense battle of wills between two characters as they fight against one another mentally and witness one another's mental breakdowns. In this book, the antagonist is vague. In fact, it's possible there isn't even one, really. But it's also not what I'd call a character-driven story, as other than the main character having a disability and that she's very immunocompromised, as you heard in the blurb, and has a less than warm relationship with her mother, which we don't see much of, we don't know a lot about her. You'd think a book in first person where a character spends a lot of time just lying around thinking would be a story kind of where you learn a lot about this character and kind of get a lot of her backstory, but we don't get that at all, which is really interesting actually. Somehow though, despite all this, the story is really compelling. It's very similar to Caitlin Starling's other book, The Cave One, The Dead something or other. As it involves a character plodding through repetitive motions, and the tension arises from whether she'll be able to accomplish these things. There's a bit of a plot in that it's unclear from the start how Meg's undergoing this trial is beneficial to those providing the care, so you wonder if something nefarious is going on. It's mimetic in that we, the reader, like Meg, are not sure whether to fully trust the nurses and the pharmaceutical guy who comes often to call. In fact, this is what keeps the book intriguing. You want to know the truth too. Like, is it just her delusions? Is it just the medication causing this? Or is this actually going on? So for the first 65-70% of this, I was pretty hooked. It's super interesting, despite me saying that not a lot goes on. Yet around the halfway mark, it started to kind of drag a little bit. Like I was still into it, but I was kind of like, okay. And then this device happens that I'm not quite fond of, which sent the book a bit downhill for me. I'm going to talk about it at the end in like a spoiler section because I don't want to obviously ruin it for you. But overall, I do think this book went on a bit too long. I think it would have been a 5-star novella for me, but it's more like a 3.5-star novel in the end. I will say, though, the book's strength is how Starling was able to put you squarely in Meg's mind when it came to the isolation she was feeling, as well as her sense of helplessness in the face of the medical team and her own sense of time and place. Her paranoia and confusion are really, really well done. They feel both real and justified, so if being in the hospital scares you, this will be a horror story for sure. If that doesn't really bother you, it's a great thriller. I can't say much else about it, as it's one of those books where it's kind of hard to say a lot without giving stuff away. I'm going to talk about the spoiler just after this, but I'll end by saying if you love medical thrillers or stories about isolation and paranoia, you'll probably really like this and you should check it out. And if you've read her other books, it's similar. So if you like those, you'll probably like this. So thank you to NetGalley and the publisher for the e-arc. I really appreciate it. So just going to talk about that spoiler for a second. So the device that I was mentioning was that, I don't even know if it's really a device, but it's when you think a character is leaving a situation, but then something compels them to stay. Like, what's the point? I don't know. I always get sick of that when it comes up in books and shows when they're like, they've almost escaped, but you're like, okay, there's like another third of the book left, so obviously they're not going to escape. So like, and also, we all know she's going to stay in the hospital. Like, how is she going to leave when she has no immune system pretty much at all? So the part where she tries to leave and then almost gets discharged, but then gets tuberculosis, I was like, do we need this? I just found it completely lacking intention and just seemed kind of like a waste of time. So, but anyway, that's just me. I don't like those kind of fake outs. And I think, though, they're used often. Obviously, in thrillers, you think someone's going to escape, and then they don't for some reason. I just find them frustrating. I don't find them, like, very... They're not my favorite kind of plot device. So yeah, again, that's more of like an opinion of mine than a real fault of the book. Obviously, you have to keep it moving somehow, and that's a good way to do it. It's just one of those where I was just like, well, obviously she's gonna stay. Anyway, yeah. So thanks.